Okay, here we are. And before I say anything more, just hang on 1 second. Oh, I've been waiting for this. 1 second. Wait for this. Okay, you ready? Boo! Can you see that?
Oh, there we go.
So Michael Beck.
Because it just sort of dawned on me that this is kind of the first time, that we're potting.
First time.
So people might not even know. They might not even know. They've been tracking with me, praying for me.
Giving you the glory that is due to you.
I think we should. I think we should just say that I have. If you are wondering what we're talking about, what we're on about, what that little hat was about, that was me having finished the PhD. So it's in fact the last time I spoke to. Yeah.
Now we have to double your pay.
Exactly. Last time I spoke to Jordan, it was just before, and Jordan and Brandon, before, Jordan said, should I call you doctor? I was like, not yet. And then, and now I see him on the end of the whole process, and it feels good. I got to say, don't have to call me doctor, but I'm done. It's pretty good. Now the trick is not to be done with theology entirely. I just want to drop the whole thing and run. I just find myself wanting to leave ministry, theology, and go and become a motorcyclist somewhere in some island.
Take up pottery on a Celtic island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just something completely different. So Jordan, you're like, where are you in the PhD process now?
It's year 3 for me, but I guess I don't know if you're a part-time student, but part-time students take literally forever. I mean, if I were given the opportunity and said, hey, money is no object, and we're not going to force you to stay in the program for X number of years. Yeah. I mean, I could put my,
pedal to the metal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would finish it in a year. But it just, the way the program works, I've got another, 2 years, I guess, 2.5 years left at least.
That's not too bad. That's good.
Yeah. So I'm like at least halfway.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah. The trick is
where are you doing the PhD and what are you doing it on?
Yeah, so I'm at the University of Birmingham in the UK, and I'm doing it it's a philosophy PhD, but I'm particularly focusing on philosophy of mind and the philosophy of religion, how those two things intersect. So the project is, I guess, in a 30,000 feet view, is let's look at conciliar Christology and look at the particular claims that are required of Orthodox Christians to affirm, and then try to match that up to anthropology and say, okay, philosophy of mind sort of questions. Does this, if we take this to be true, does this limit or shift or change our understanding of anthropology in any way? So it's pretty broad. So it could be anything from, okay, the creeds say that Jesus came as a male. Does that have any problems or issues for sexuality or gender? To, well, it says Jesus descended to the dead. Does that have any problems for something like a physicalist understanding of the human person or a dualist understanding of the human person? Does this generate any friction? And if it does, then for me at least, I want to affirm the conciliar creed. So I want to say, well, okay, then I'm going to have to reject these versions of anthropology. And look, this is the one that's left standing. So that's my way of getting there and saying, I want to affirm this because I'm taking something that I have firmer belief in and understanding and using that as a way to get there.
Dude, I don't know what I'm more impressed with, that whole thing that you just did there in general, or that you did it at 5:30 in the morning.
You passed the 3 a.m. test.
Maybe, yeah, exactly. It's like that's as close as you'll ever get to the 3 a.m. test. I don't know. Maybe you need to talk to us about the kind of coffee you're drinking right now. Is that?
I almost went and got coffee, but I was like, I'd rather have the extra 6 minutes of sleep. So,
wow,
oh, dude.
I mean, just when we thought it couldn't get any better, that's amazing.
And, I don't. If you've got the 3-year-old who's there on the camera making sure he doesn't wake up and waltz into the room.
Oh goodness!
Because you know how these things go. If you record at weird hours, your kids are going to wake up.
Of course, yeah, dude. Oh man, that's crazy. So, anyways, for those listening in, we to make our hours meet up. Are you and Brandon in the same state or city or? Okay, you are. Yep.
Well, I guess
basically,
I don't know
we're
if we're
10
the same
minutes away.
Yeah, it's not the same city technically, but
okay,
we're 10 minutes away.
Yeah, right. so we had to try and get this to work, and so we got this really weird dynamic going on where so with what happens usually is when we go past, so it's now 11:30 at night for us, going to the witching hour for Nick and I. And what happens, we've been in this space a lot, and we decided not to do this anymore, because what happens is I start slurring my speech. It just gets really weird. It's like when past 40, I just wasn't handling well on that stuff. And Nick gets like grumpy. Like he turns into this like.
Dude, I'm always grumpy.
I know, but even more than
that's
that.
true.
That's like so. And then the other, on the flip side of that, when Andre's in his prime time, like he is now, he gets all hyperactive and he tells these stupid jokes, and it's just like it just doesn't record well. It doesn't work,
No, so, we lose a lot of likability.
Exactly. So, dude, and then you guys at 5:30 cranking it out. Woo.
Yeah. I mean, the likability factor, I don't know if it's going up with having us, but we'll it does.
Definitely.
Especially because Mike is definitely.
I'm just wondering, we should introduce these guys or something.
Yeah, let's do that. That's good.
I was doing that. I was doing that like surreptitiously.
No, okay. No, well, let's get into this. Okay. So if you haven't, I mean, if you're not watching, a lot of people still don't like to watch us, and I don't know why, but if you're listening, then you'll notice that there've been a few extra voices, and we got the London Lyceum guys with us. So if you don't know,
the only analytical Baptist Reformed podcast in the world, or something like that.
Yeah,
close enough. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be Reformed Baptist or Baptist Reformed?
The only analytic Baptist and confessional podcast.
But I mean, we're Reformed too, so we can.
All right. Well, that would be. It's kind of the subject matter for the evening, isn't it?
Yeah. After reading Jordan's paper, I don't know if I'm Reformed or not.
I had a few moments of self-doubt myself. Yeah. I think we all got pushed to our limits. So we got the London Lyceum guys with us, which is huge, and we really appreciate what you guys doing on that podcast. We love it, and I didn't know about it until a few weeks before you got in touch, and then I've just been checking it out ever since and recommending it to everyone. I love it. So good job there, and so glad we were able to set this up. And one thing I just want, before we get into talking about, we do want to focus the discussion a little bit around this great article that Jordan wrote a while back. But before we go there, let's just use the opportunity to plug the podcast a little bit, or maybe just on the way to that, tell us a little bit about yourselves and who you are, and just give our listeners some context there, and then if you would as well, it'd just be good to hear like how did the podcast come about? How did it get kicked off? Anything you want to share there?
So I'll start, I guess. So I'm Brandon. I'm a pastor in North Carolina. So Jordan and I, we actually met through Twitter, oddly enough.
No way.
And this would have been, I guess, summer of 2018. And I was going to Africa for a couple of weeks. And then when I got back, we were going to meet at Starbucks because I found out he was moving to about 10 minutes away from where I live. So we were going to meet and talk about covenant theology, things like that. And then when we did, we started reading books together and hanging out all the time and stuff. And I don't know, I guess one day we were like, well, maybe we should start a podcast. So I guess we had kind of a two-pronged reason for wanting to start the podcast. Number one, Baptists, at least where we're from, do not have the greatest reputation when it comes to thinking deeply about our faith and about the Christian tradition and things like that. So that was the first thing. But then also both of us, we have great reverence for the 1689. So we wanted to put a 1689 presence online that was more positive and not as combative as a lot of what you see. We don't have the greatest reputation in our tribe on Twitter and things like that. So that was kind of the two reasons that we wanted to do it. We wanted to put something out there that, where we were serious about the things we were thinking about, but we were also, not always trying to pick a fight with, this tribe or that tribe and that kind of thing. So we wanted to kind of that was the reason that it began to be just interviews, because 95% of the episodes are interviews. So we're interviewing someone, whether it's a historian, philosopher, or theologian, so we can learn more about them and take some things from their thought and bring it into our own. So that's kind of how it started.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
And I think I got into philosophy honestly through my associate pastor back when I was living in Louisville, Kentucky, and started reading and fell in love with philosophy. What one thing I noticed was there's just not a lot of Reformed philosophers out there, at least right now.
Right.
And I thought, why is that? Well, I want to kind of fill that space and help build that area up and say, I want to do Reformed theology within the philosophical context and bring that voice there. And so that was part of I think the impetus as well for the podcast is we want to bring philosophy into conversation with Reformed theology, which isn't always happening. So there's a lot of Baptist podcasts. There's a lot of confessional podcasts, Reformed podcasts. There's not a lot that are trying to add in analytic philosophy or analytic theology to it. So I think that's the real unique thing that we've done. Both me and Brandon have philosophy degrees. We both study with Greg Welty, who we both find as just, paragon of excellence in all things. I mean, he's a churchman, he's a pastor. He values that above his academic works and pursuits, but he's also, he's a serious philosopher in his own right. Studied with Richard Swinburne. If you know philosophy, he's like one of the big deals of the last 100 years, like one of the biggest philosopher names that comes to mind of anybody. So, he's serious in all those respects. So we've learned a lot from him. And that really, I think, encouraged us and shaped us in this way. But I think it's also unique. Brandon's a pastor. I'm not. I was on staff at a church before I moved here. But since I moved here, I've just been a normal local church member doing my academic studies, working in a normal job. So I'm not inundated, I guess, to some degree with theology every day. I wake up in the morning and I go do finance and data and project management and random stuff like that that's completely unrelated. So it's kind of a nice mix to have, I think, us two there together. We bring a nice balance depending on the topic. We both have more expertise, and so it's pretty cool.
That is so cool. So do you both attend the same church?
No, so my church is about 25 minutes away in the town that I grew up in. So it's not the church that I grew up in, but and then Jordan's church is about 15 minutes from his house in the other direction. So our churches are actually probably about 45 minutes apart.
Right. Are they Reformed Baptist confessional churches or not really?
No. So my church would just be, so normally I'm talking to people in an American context, so I can just say a traditional Southern Baptist church, and people will know what I mean. But I don't know if your listeners will. But
we kind of know. We know all sorts of things.
So we're a Southern Baptist church. Baptist Faith and Message is our confessional statement at the church. So I'm not the senior pastor. I'm one of the associates. The church is reforming, and I would lowercase r reforming right now. We're moving into a healthier direction. I'm pleased with how things are going. The Lord's really been kind to us. But no, it's not a Reformed Baptist church by any stretch. But I'm trying to bring a little bit of that in. So
yeah.
I think my church would probably be more on the Reformed end of the spectrum, but you wouldn't come in there and be like, wow, this is a Reformed Baptist church.
Yeah.
That would not come to your mind. Though I think in doctrine, they would be largely Reformed. It would be pretty, if you want to use Reformed, it's going to have to be like a pretty expansive, flexible definition to some degree. Yeah. But they're like, if for me, I would probably go in there and be like, yeah, I'm kind of capital R Reformed, and they wouldn't have a problem with that.
Right, totally. So yeah, I was kind of interested just to, because even just this article, if your, pastors or, how they would have received something like this, because certainly some Reformed Baptist churches would have given you, a little bit of a runaround, just a little.
Oh, for sure. I don't think any of my churches have ever read this article, nor would I don't think any of them care to. However, my current church, they read I've got a piece on gender that came out, and they read that and they liked it. So that's even a more inflammatory topic.
Okay. Brilliant. All right. So on that note, actually one more question. How did the name, I've been wanting to ask you guys forever, London Lyceum, where did that come from?
So we were just I don't even remember who came up with it, but we were just kicking around different ideas. And so basically we were, we wanted to be self-consciously Baptist in what we were doing. So that was where the London came from the Second
Right.
London Confession.
Right.
And then Lyceum was Aristotle's Academy. So that
Cool.
brings in
Yeah.
like the philosophy piece of it. So we just put those together, which I didn't realize there's actually a Lyceum theater in London until
Right.
we did this. So now when you Google it, that comes up, but I mean, it's too late now. So.
Yeah, there's very random occasions where people will get mad at the theater for some reason and tag us on Twitter. Yeah, I'm just like, okay.
Classic. Cool. All right, so let's get into this article that you wrote, man. This is in the Journal of Biblical and Theological Studies. Congratulations for getting it published there. That's great. Reforming Credobaptism, a Westminster alternative for Reformed Baptist identity. I'm trying to remember how I got into this article. I think it was just totally random, to be honest. I think I just stumbled onto it somehow, and it was love at first sight. It was just, a Westminster alternative for Reformed Baptist identity. I was like, what the heck? Who is this guy? What is going on? And so I just devoured the article. And then what I did was immediately just emailed the elders at our church. Got them all to read it. I especially loved you a little bit on system subscription. It's kind of like it was the expression I've been waiting for. We've been trying to wangle that through and figure out exactly what to do with that. And I just loved it. And the elders loved it. And we've been using that term. We've been plagiarizing some Stefaniak ever since.
That's awesome. Well, let me tell you a little bit of the origin story of this, because I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
So, a lot of papers, I don't know if you guys write a lot or try to write. I mean, I've got all sorts of ideas that come out of my mind and I'll end up just writing it. But this one was almost a little bit out of my own existential crisis,
Right.
Where there was a period in my time, I don't know if it was 2016, 2017, where I started questioning my own baptismal views. I had a good friend of mine who was a PCA pastor who was actually really the impetus for me becoming a Calvinist after high school. I thought he was crazy and nuts, but he was like actually cool about it and was like, hey, it's just in the Bible, read it.
Yeah.
And, over years, I ended up becoming a Calvinist. And then we ended up talking baptism again. And I really started to question my views on this. And I almost became a Presbyterian at one point. And this was almost birthed out of my attempt of, let me wrestle with it and see if I can still be a Credo Baptist while affirming particular things. And so that's ended up how it becoming a paper, and it became birthed. It was just my own trying to wrestle with the actual stuff internally, rather than just doing it in an academic, just abstract level.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are the ones that make the good ones. I think, those existential wrestles. Exactly, and you can tell, man. Yeah, and definitely, you get the idea, you get the impression that you've sort of wanted to see how far you can push the envelope and walk on that very cusp before you sort of click over. But that's what I appreciated about it. It's just so that's in my mind exactly what academic article or journal entry should do. It should really get you thinking and push it, and not necessarily have to be the pastor and preach the sermon, but really get everyone thinking about it. If you disagree, why? Is the big thing you have to respond to. And you've made a great case, and it's just very clear. It's a great article. It's not overly academic either. So, if anyone's freaking out because of the description of Jordan's PhD project there, don't be freaked out by that. This is a lot more on the ground and accessible for us lowly Reformed Baptists. So go and check it out. And it's free. You can get it. Did I get it illegally, or is it free?
No, it's totally free online. So if you just search my name and put in like Credo Baptism or something, it'll be like the first thing you come up with in Google.
There we go. Boom.
Michael put it in the notes.
Oh, I'll put it in the
episode.
show notes. This is good. Oh, this is happening. This is you just watch me work. I'm going to put this in the show notes. It's going to go into the computer. It's going to be on the Google Lens. It's going to be on the lens. All right. That's going to be good.
In the clouds.
In the clouds. It's going to be amazing. All right. Now, let's, what I thought maybe to do, just because there is, as I was reading it through again today, there is actually a lot in here. It does cover a lot of ground, right? And I thought we're actually, the way we roll, we're never going to get even to like a quarter of it. We're just not that organized. Yeah.
Can we start with that reference that you made to system subscription versus total subscription? Because actually, I think that is you referenced it, so some people may not know what we're talking about, first of all. Second of all, I think it's a great place to start because it's such an important thing. So I don't know if...
All right, well, I mean, we could do that, which would be kind of like an average plan. Or we could do it my way, which is
which is the way
a lot more organized. So what I thought we could do is just at least give John an opportunity to just touch, and Brandon also, like, if you've read through this and you guys in your chats, you feel like there's some particular angle here that you just really want to bring out. Let's just go ahead and give you the opportunity just to mention it, so maybe even just a little synopsis of what you feel like you were trying to do with the paper, and then in the process, anything you basically want to just let people know is in there, just in case we don't get to it, is what I'm saying.
Like maybe on total or system subscription.
We'll definitely get to that one. Just relax.
Might be your angle that you want to bring out. That's all I'm saying. You might want to start there.
Just leave the guy alone, let him do his things.
No, he can do what he likes. I'm just saying he might want to start there. That's all.
Cool.
So I'll give a disclaimer before I do anything and say this is my paper and my work. I don't think Brandon agrees with me in every area of this.
So I'll let
him
that's a big disclaimer.
We like those kinds of disclaimers.
That's crazy.
We have those.
As far as things that I would say, like, these are the big ideas that I found most interesting. I will get to the subscription thing third. So there's two other things I want to bring up. The first one I want to bring up is I became, I think, pretty much convinced that the one covenant of grace, two administrations way of thinking about covenant theology was the right way to think about it. But I was not convinced that necessarily led to me being a Baptist. So that's a lot of the way I've tried to frame the article and frame how I've thought about things, is saying, hey, I think this. And, I was reading last night John Gill's giant body of doctrinal divinity.
There we go.
And lo and behold, here he is saying pretty much the same stuff that I'm saying.
Exactly.
One covenant of grace, two administrations.
Yes.
It is the same thing in the old and the new. It's just the way it's administered is differently.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to push back on both sides. Say, hey, Paedo-Baptist, it's not the game, set, match once you've got this framework. It's not game over. You haven't won it. You've got to do some more work. And at the same time, the Credobaptists say, hey, it's not like bad and scary. You don't have to give up and say it's over if I give them this system. You could still be a Credobaptist in that framework.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to push on was, I'm probably some people will say I'm a bad Baptist, but I do think.
Oh, that's why we like you, bro. That's why we like you.
I do not know how you get around the fact that if you, as a Baptist, don't admit an infant baptism as, you could say it's irregular. It's I think that's the typical language that's been used, but I don't know if you don't accept that in some fashion. I don't know how you can be Catholic or ecumenical in any sense. I don't know how you can say you're not actually a Christian. So I think that, obviously that's explosive, so we can talk about that. But the subscription stuff, I think that is important. So, the system versus full subscription. And the reason I wanted to press on this area, which we can unpack that later if you want, but I think, at least particularly when it comes to the Reformed label, there's guys like R. Scott Clark who are very vigorous in defending, the terminology of Reformed. And part of the reason they will do that is say that, well, at least they'll define Baptists out of the Reformed identity, is because, well, you're denying a central part of the confession. And I want to say, well, let's be clear on how we think about the confession, because you deny parts of your confession.
Yeah.
So if you do, then no one's actually fully subscribing to every word of it. So let's think through how we're subscribing to it. So I think there's like a robust sort of system subscription where you're subscribing to all the important things that make it work.
Yeah.
And you can take out certain pieces and the system can still work. So you can take out, a lot of people have issues with, the Pope being the Antichrist and the Second Latin Confession of Faith. And I think you can take that piece out and the system still works.
Right.
You're not cutting at the heart of the confession. It still functions correctly. So thinking through just what can I take out and it still function properly, I think is the way to think about it. Obviously, it becomes difficult from context to context because, well, who is the deciding factor on what can actually be taken out?
Right.
And I don't know
right.
the answer to that. I think the local church has to decide if this
Yep.
is something that's going to hurt the confession overall. But I think you've got to have a way of understanding it. I mean, you talk to PCA or OPC, at least here in America, the two primary Presbyterian denominations, conservative wise, and almost all of them take exception somewhere.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is not like a radical thing to say you can take an exception to something. It's just understanding what you can take exception to.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would say, well, you can take exception to the major doctrines. And I think everybody understands, like, well, you can't deny Credobaptism and be at a Baptist church.
Yeah.
You can't you can't deny the Trinity. Those sort of things are obvious,
Yeah.
but it becomes obviously much more difficult context to context on what is okay and what isn't. But
Yeah.
I wanted to say, look, no one's really a full 100% subscriptionist when it comes to something this thick and this big.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, even though there are going to be those little squabbles that you still have to have, as you say, maybe from local church to local church, what that does do, though, is it does give you something very concrete to work with. As you've said, does it cut to the heart of the system? Because then you can't touch that. If it is part of the system, leave it alone. And even that is helpful because, you can get, and this has been some of my frustration, where you get some really intensely hardcore kind of full subscription like personas and churches, and yet they will take some, perhaps, some implicit exception to a really important part of the system that actually, you really should not be cutting that a little bit, even though it's one line in the confession, it's like huge, and so it doesn't really matter how much word count you've got. It matters, what that's saying. And I think that's massive. So,
what's the covenant works would be an example, because that's I think minor terminological usage in the confession. However, that's doing a huge amount of legwork.
Massive. Yeah. Beautiful example. Exactly. So, and even the stuff we'll talk about a little bit later, I suppose, with just some of that definition around the covenant of grace and how it's worded. I mean, those things are, again, they're going to be all encompassing. So I think that's one of the reasons to go and check this article out if you haven't already. It is very, very helpful at that point. Now, Brandon, what do you disagree on, bro? Just hook us up with a little bit of dirty laundry. Yeah.
So I'm definitely more in the 1689 federalism camp. I did not come here today to be that representative because
Could you please
or
leave
as we like to call it, 1689 federal visionism, because we sometimes get the two terms confused.
That's so true, and that
Very
usually
different,
happens
very
around
different.
midnight. So
It usually happens late at night. Yeah.
So that's I guess one of the disagreements that Jordan and I have. But I mean, I'm not like I'm not going to fight about it. Like, it's not something that I think is some huge deal. No, maybe you guys think it's a huge deal, but
If you did fight about it, who would win? And what sort of fight would you have? Like, would it be like a sort
it
of
would be like jiu-jitsu or
pillow
like
fight? I think that's a decent.
would it be
option.
more like a kata? Would it be like a staged
like a dance fight?
like a dance fight?
Fighting. Yeah.
I am not jumping into this debate without backup, and I don't think I have any backup here.
Oh, it's to be like a gang fight.
That's right. That's exactly what it would be. But
Just jumping in an alley,
And I guess when I read the paper, and I mean I've read the paper a few times. I read it before it was published, and I gave a little bit of feedback if I remember correctly. I don't know how valuable that was, but I'm just not that concerned with the can I call myself reformed thing. So
Right,
a lot of the what he's pressing on here just doesn't it's not even doing anything for me. Like, because I don't
Right.
I mean I don't care if the cool Presbyterians allow me to call myself reformed or whatever.
Right.
Like, that's just not like something that bothers me. I've never had and maybe that's part of it. I didn't have the existential crisis that Jordan's talking about. I know that a lot of Baptists that become exposed to Calvinism and Reformed theology, they go through this, and for whatever reason, I just didn't. And I like to think I've read a lot of the same material. It just never really. I just think I was just that convinced that
Right.
believers' baptism was correct that it just never. So I don't know. And I guess I came with a lot more questions today than I did answers, but
Right.
But yeah, So Jordan and I, we do have a disagreement on this, but I mean, it's not anything too crazy. So
Right. Now, it's interesting, the whole, that's often my stumbling block with the 1689 federal vision thing. I'm just kidding. I knew you were saying that.
What is
but-
that the wrong way of saying it?
That's the wrong way, yeah. So, but the thing is that often I feel like that, all the guys that I've spoken to who really like that idea, it's sort of driven by not so much the label Reform, but the label Reformed Baptist. Like, we want to be historically termed Reformed Baptist, and it feels like that drives so much of it. Whereas, and I get what you're saying. So I feel that in that I don't necessarily feel the desire to call myself Reformed or get so caught up on that, but I also don't want to fall into the trap of calling myself a Reformed Baptist, and I feel like I want to just steer a course in between. So I think anything that shakes it up a little bit and gets people thinking about it is good at this point, because it feels like more and more the 1689 Fed thing, it's just becoming like the Kool-Aid, and it's just everyone's just drinking it, and that that's cool.
You guys
Whatever.
are missing out on the classical theism stuff. That's the real Kool-Aid.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. Now we're not entirely missing out. We have one representative.
No. We're getting a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and Nick Cleavely. Nick Cleavely's
So-
our classical theist guy. Yeah.
let me ask you guys. So what do you think? Obviously, when we look at the 1689 federalism versus the one covenant, two administrations view, there's definitely a practical implication when it comes to how Paedo-Baptists understand the implications of that. But just between the Credo-Baptist camps, what do you think are the practical differences between those two views, and how that works itself out? Do you think there are any, or is it
I
just a
think
theological
so.
dispute? Yeah.
I mean, I think it can be a theological dispute only, but I think, at least from what I've read, a lot of the 1689 federalism camp, this is not everybody, so put that disclaimer out there. If you don't agree with this, I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about, I think, the whole, from the literature that I've read, common themes and threads are you end up denying particular benefits of Old Testament believers. So you either have this almost like a regeneration 0.5, where it really becomes a 1.0 in the New Testament. You don't actually get regeneration. You kind of get it. You get like small little aspects of it. You don't get, which I identify regeneration with circumcision of the heart. You'll see this terminology all the time. Circumcision of the heart didn't happen until the New Testament. I just don't think that's true. And I think they deny the typological link to some degree between circumcision and baptism, and they want to say these are two separate things completely. I think you lose a lot of texture in baptism when you sever that link completely. So I think baptism is a fuller, newer, unique typological fulfillment of circumcision, but I don't want to sever that link, because I think there's a lot of important understanding. And what will often happen, at least in the way I've seen things, is they'll end up denying some of the signification that's going on with baptism. And I like the usage of sign and seal. I'm fine with that language. I think a lot of 1689 federalism would say, no, I don't want to use that language.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of theological robustness that you could end up losing within. I mean, I think the Reformed tradition is largely right in how they've thought about things, and I don't apologize for wanting to be a part of that stream. I think it's a good thing to want to be a part of a robust tradition. I mean, they could be wrong, but I think they get a lot of stuff right.
Yeah. I think, and you guys Nick, Andre, feel free to chip in on this, but one of the things that comes to mind for me is just that, especially when I've talked it through with the best representatives, I think, of 1689. So I remember Sam Renian, for example, came down to New Zealand, and we know his dad, Jim Renian, quite well, and he's kind of our, just good friend. And so, we obviously none of this is said in any kind of meanness. We love those guys to death, and we're so close. Everything we're dealing with, like, everything is under the absolute microscope here, because it's just what we do. We just love doing it. We can't help ourselves. So for anyone looking in, they're going, what the heck is the difference even? And we're going, whoa, but there is a difference. There is a difference, and especially when you start talking about it. It's often happened that, well, okay, all right, so it just comes down to almost like a semantic thing, in that you would not use the word administration of the covenant of grace, where I would, and you would just kind of do this convoluted thing to say the same thing as me, but actually there's a little bit of a difference, but it's so minute. So we got to say that up front. But I think that the problem for me is that in trying to say it a different way, it's almost like we're working against everything that was worked for in the whole point of the wording of the 1689, which was to show ourselves connected to that stream that Jordan was just talking about, that, that we're not disconnected. We're not fundamentally different from that Westminster tradition. It's coming out of that same exact thing, to the point that we're basically plagiarize the confession and just make this tiny tweak on this issue. So I feel like even if the best representatives are not trying to sever that link so much, it sort of opens the door to those who are perhaps more thoughtlessly coming along and saying things that are, really right in the crosshair, and rightly so, in guys like Scott Clark, for example, who are pinpointing that and going, you know what, that is actually a problem. That's not actually what the Westminster, that's not even close to the Reformed thing. And I think that, why open a door to that kind of thing when really one of the things that Reformed Baptists today prize is usually they've come out of dispensationalism, to some degree or another. So I think to one degree, it sort of provides a halfway house for them, in 1689 Fed. But at the same time, I don't like that. We need to come all the way through. We don't want to be going back in that direction. So that's one of the things. I don't know if you had any other thoughts.
Jordan's listening to you anymore.
Yeah, Jordan, where did he go? Where did Jordan go?
He was raptured, bro. We got left behind.
My goodness. All of it was wrong. All of it was wrong. And the rapture is what happened. Okay, look at that.
Let me throw in my reasons why I'm not a 1689 Federalist. I think it comes down to hermeneutics.
Yeah.
I think we're sort of Kleinian in our orientation. And so we have a typological administration of the covenant of grace in Abraham and Moses. And I think the hermeneutic that gives you is a tool that unlocks the whole of the scriptures in a way that holds up the law gospel distinction, in a way that helps you negotiate all the other theological minds, as it were. So I've just found it so much more satisfying than anything that 1689 federalism has given us.
So just to firm, so I think Mike's point about the whole, like whether or not we may not think it's very important to identify as kind of reformed or something, but the point that we were making earlier, I think Jordan made a point about this as well before he was raptured, was the whole thing about Catholicity. So the whole idea about wanting to be within the Reformed tradition is a way of both making sure that the Reformed tradition stays appropriately broad enough to incorporate those of a Baptist persuasion, but also a way of keeping Baptists within something historic and Catholic. And so I think that's important. I think just to pick up on what others have been saying, but also like the hermeneutics, like Nick was saying, is really, really important. So like it does have an impact on the way that you read the Bible. And even though not all of that will be obvious all the time, the whole hermeneutical approach is a practical outlook and will have an implication somewhere down the line. Mm-hmm. And I guess a little bit like the way that, if you get a Reformed guy who's denying the covenant of works, in lots of ways, it's going to line up in exactly the same way, and you barely even may notice that at first. But down the line, because theology is a bit like a puzzle, and if you move one piece into the wrong place, it does have a knock-on effect. Somewhere down the line, that denial of the covenant of works is going to have an impact on theological formulation, either in that own person's life or in the movement, further on down the line. So I think those are some important so it's not like we're not quite at the stage where we're nowhere near the stage, I should say, where we're excommunicating one another, but it is rather at the point where we are concerned enough for each other's expressions of faith to safeguard each other from potential errors that may creep in through the hermeneutical differences and through the knock-on effect of it later on.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, go for it.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just because this is something I wanted to ask about too. So to put those two things side by side from your guys' perspective, the 1689 Federalist, well, we'll just call it error from your perspective, and then what you just brought up, the denial of the covenant of works. Because from where I'm sitting, those two seem like two totally different levels of departure. Like, to me, the covenant of works is much more fundamental and foundational, and to deny that just seems inconceivable to me.
Yeah.
But you have somebody like John Murray that, like, we still call that guy Reformed. So, like,
Right.
now I don't understand, like, where the Reformed identity stuff. Well, I mean, most people are still going to call him Reformed, but according to Jordan's,
yes, you're right. You're right.
according to Jordan's paper here, he wouldn't be Reformed because he denies the covenant of works, which Jordan has said in R1 that is a. So I guess my question is, when it comes to denying the covenant of works versus what we're doing with 1689 federalism, like, do you think that Murray's error is something that we should be more concerned with when it comes to who is in the Reform camp and who's not? But I don't hear that talked about. And maybe it's just because I'm in more of a Baptist context, so Murray's not brought up as much. But it doesn't seem like that's he's kicked out of the Reform camp as often as particular Baptists are. But I could be wrong with that. I'm totally open to.
And saying, hey, you dude, you're denying something that's central to Reformed identity. Come on, man, get your stuff together, get your act together. I'm cool with doing that. And for the record, I did rapture, but I heard everything because I'm the smart one who wears the wireless headphones. So when my kid wakes up, I can go.
Wyatt is coming back in.
Yeah, Wyatt is the new unwired, bro. It's
That's right.
so. Well, we're glad you're back. And there was a moment of doubt. Like, what the heck happened to Jordan there? My goodness, he decided it was too hot. He's running. No, I don't know. But so on that point, though, I think one of the things I suppose we are a little bit biased in here is if we're not Baptist, then we're Kleinian. If we're not Kleinian, then we're Baptist. Either which way, Murray's not faring well. He's kind of on the other end of all of that, And so, looking at Murray, though, and thinking about the way that he sort of chipped in on the whole covenant theology thing, I mean, he was self-consciously revising. He admitted it freely, and which, I mean, to his credit. So I think, he's one of those guys that was just, hey, I'm cool to revise this and take what comes my way, And I think, the Norman Shepherd end point of that was enough of a warning for everyone that that's not a good thing. But in terms of, I agree, the covenant of works issue is just 1,000 times. In fact, I would always err on the side of 1689 federalism rather than something else, precisely for that reason, in that it's got a nice law grace contrast. And as soon as you start chipping away at the law gospel thing, that's when the real problem comes in, which is, more along the other side. So, I mean, those are important things to keep in mind. I think that's a good. I think Jordan himself raises the point, though. Is it on the second page here, third page, something like that, where he says, everyone's going to quibble on the points he's raised, and I think that's right. I mean, it's good that you acknowledge that, you've come up with what these things that you're seeing as these fundamental elements of Reformed identity. The Reformed identity debate is a very deep and dark and nasty place. It's like, you want to spend too much time there. Trust me, you will. It's not pretty. It's people like Scott Clark live there. They live in that place, and it's an angry place. So, we. I mean, I really appreciate Scott Clark. So I didn't mean that meanly, but it's just what I'm talking about, right? So everyone's going to quibble on all of this stuff. That's totally true. And, I think what you've raised there, Brandon, is one of those quibbles. It'll just be, all right, well, let's tweak the wording and say not quite. It doesn't have to be that you have to assume a Kleinian version of the covenant of works. You could have sort of more a garden covenant as it works in a broader system. I don't know. So that might be some of the kickback, along with, as you mentioned, you don't have Credobaptism on as a key feature, which I imagine would get a little bit of little bit of kickback, just a little from the Credobaptist
sure,
side.
but I would just go back and say, look, most of you Presbyterians, you think if you get this sort of covenant theology, it just comes with the package. So even in your own stuff, you probably wouldn't even put it there just because you assume there's a necessary connection. And I want to say, no, that is bad logic. It's not a necessary connection. Step back. But as you mentioned, I guess this reformed identity, I did what philosophers like to do, and I put it, nice and clear, like here's R1, R2, R3. And to your question, Brandon, is there any cash difference? From my reading anyway, now this isn't across the board, but I feel like a lot of 1689 Federalists will want to deny all three of the points that I brought up as important for being reformed identity. So the first one was just talking about covenant theology. Naturally, they are going to deny the one covenant, two administrations. They're oftentimes going to deny that the sacraments are means of God's objective grace. So they're going to say, it's subjective in some way. And I want to say these are objective things. That doesn't deny that there's a subjective element that you're experiencing something. But I want to say emphasis primarily on objective. And then that third one, the visible invisible doctrine of the church. Now, I think you can find this in all sorts of Reformed Baptists using this distinction, but oftentimes, for whatever reason, in contemporary Reformed Baptist theology, I feel like people are wanting to deny that distinction and wanting, even if they're not trying to say it, the way they are arguing for it, it ends up being we only have truly regenerate people in our churches, 100%. And I think when I press them on that, almost every time they back off and say, well, you're going to have false converts and stuff like that. But I just want to be like, then what's the problem with the distinction if you admit it?
And I'm, one of the things I was really excited about in doing this, this particular topic and just talking with you guys is we have a lot of Kleinians that listen in, and talking with them about, what it means to be a Baptist at some points, when we had those conversations, those very frustrations come up, on their side. That you could. This is why I think I would love them to read this article, because I think this would sound sane to them. What you're saying, even if they end up disagreeing with you, they would go, "All right, I really appreciate what you've done here, because these are all the frustrating points that we have, or the points with which we are frustrated." And you've got to be able to see some of these new. Now it cuts both ways, obviously, but I just think that they're getting onto a lot of the more dispensational-ish Baptist stuff, and it drives them nuts.
So even if I turn out wrong, I feel like this is a good argument to say, look, the stuff that Paedo-Baptists constantly use against Baptists, it doesn't work, because I think you can do these things to rebut those charges. So you need to come up with better arguments to say that Baptists are getting the Bible wrong or getting covenant theology wrong, because I think you can do this, and I think it can work. And even if it turns out that that's not what the Bible actually says, well, then that's obviously a point against me, a huge point. It would all fall down. However, I think even if you do that, it's just showing, like, theologically if you systematize it, it can still work. So, don't stop bringing up these bad examples and bad arguments to me, because I don't think they follow.
Yeah, that's great. And the big thing, I think I agree 100% with the sign and seal stuff, and sacramentology is important. And I know you do quote Horton a few times a year, who's our, modern day Kleinian guru. I read Horton's covenant theology, and honestly, the first time I read it, I was like, I don't see anything wrong with this. I don't know where it goes wrong. I can't find the problem. And I'm like, where does infant baptism come into this? Like, you read his introducing covenant theology, it's like randomly, like, parachuting out of nowhere. It doesn't exactly. I always describe it like a you got this beautifully formulated engine, there it is, and you lift the hood and you just see every part. There's the carb, I have no idea about engines, but you know what I mean? Like,
this is a weird analogy for you.
Just like, well, what else is it? Come on, we got a carburetor. What else? There's like an exhaust pipe. No, that's not.
It's like oil.
There's oil somewhere in there. And anyway, so let's say you knew what an engine looked like. So there we go. You're appreciating its beauty, and then you take this baby for a spin, and then you got this this piece of wire with a little engine part dangling off the fender, just around the back, and that's how infant baptism fits into this whole thing. Now, I'm not, again, I realize there are a lot of guys listening to this that hold infant baptism dear.
Irritating everyone, yeah.
I know, but I want to. But this is my whole thing. Like, I'm trying to say that as a Kleinian and as someone who really appreciates Horton's theology, I'm seeing that slotted in and not part of the system. So and obviously there's going to be back and forth on that. But still.
And I don't want Michael Horton to take this the wrong way, because I still hope that Mike has a shot at becoming part of the staff at Westminster, California. But
not anymore. Just killed that.
I don't want Horton to take this wrong, but a lot more Baptists over here are appreciating Horton's stuff more and more, precisely because if you are embracing covenant theology, but don't see how it conflicts with your stance on baptism, then Horton does that extremely well. It's not at all a point of conflict. So a lot of guys are loving Horton, from a Baptist point of view.
Good. All right. Now,
can I just say one little thing there?
Do it.
So this may be slightly more provocative on the 1689 federalism thing, because I kind of see the covenant, to come back to the original question of why are we talking about them in the same thing, and I do agree that the covenant of works is more essential than the 1689 federalism debate over over that particular view of how the covenants are working. But I do kind of see them as twin problems. They have a kind of relationship with each other. And I don't know if this is pushing the boat out too far, but this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the way I see it. That, if you come back in terms of basically understanding how traditional sort of Westminster covenant theology has interpreted the Mosaic covenant, and how 1689 federalism interprets the Abrahamic covenant, I think they're making the same problem on two different ends of the spectrum. So that is either to deny the graciousness of the Abrahamic covenant, like 1689 federalism, or to deny the workiousness of the Mosaic covenant, which is the kind of Westminster stuff.
That's not a word, dude.
Yeah, I just look, man, words. Did you know what I meant?
Just that was a neologism. That was beautiful.
Workishness.
That was beautiful.
The workishness.
Yeah.
It's totally a word.
We might freeze frame that one. That was good. I liked it. Don't apologize. Be proud. Be bold.
I like it. I like what you're saying there, and I think I would high five you on that one and say, yep, I'm on board. Now, obviously, I do think you're gonna, if 1689 Federalists is listening, they're gonna be like, whoa, I affirm the graciousness of Abraham. I'm like, wait, no, you don't, because you cut it in half and you say part of it's works, part of it's grace, and I would say the whole thing's grace.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of them don't even do that. A lot of them just go, no, it's just all works. And
if you read Jeff Johnson's book on the two kingdoms or whatever, I think I was like blown away by some of the claims he was making. I was like, this is just dispensationalism.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what you like. I know that hurts somebody's feelings, but it is.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get around it.
That's and that's the problem. It's sort of, it just leans in that direction so much sometimes. And, you feel like, if you haven't really worked it through properly as a Baptist coming out of dispensationalism, and you haven't given it what it needs to get all the way into like what I would think is a really helpful framework, like, a Klein Horton, so anything along those lines, you're going to have all these issues and all these frustrations that you're just not used to thinking of the whole thing in terms of a covenant of grace. So the first out that you get, you're going to take it, so along comes Jeffrey Johnson and everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, well, there we go. We can still be covenantal and reformed and whatever, but we don't have to believe in this essential thing really, which is the unity of it all. Which I don't like it. I admit that it's not something that I would let me say this as well. If someone came to GraceNet and they which is the church I pastor, and they go, okay, I'm a sold out 1689 Federalist. There I go, welcome. You'll be happy, just welcome home, because when we come down to the actual issues is when you'll have to want to nut this out. So if it's on why we call it a sacrament, why we call it this, why we do the Sabbath, why, any of those issues, what's the rationale for it? How do we know what happened to Old Testament saints? How do we process all of that? That's when we will start seeing the differences. But otherwise, just come right in and enjoy and relax. So let me emphasize that point at the same time. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think the Renahans are both of them are exemplars in how to handle 1689 federalism well.
I agree.
I think if I wanted to be a 1689 federalist, I would go with what they're saying
Yes.
compared to some of the other versions of it.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, exactly right. Couldn't have put that better myself. That is absolutely perfect because you know, it, and this happens, I suppose. It always happens. You've got there's your kid, bro. Nice.
Oh,
It's all stuff.
He made its way in.
Oh, this means it must be wakey time. This
can
must
he
be
hear us or not though? Can we say hello to him?
Yeah. Well, he can't hear you, but
No, don't worry.
All right.
You want to see everybody?
There we go.
Hey,
Oh
he
man,
doesn't wanna
kitty.
see us.
So yeah,
So read me my book, Daddy.
like right now while you're podcasting, read it
Like
to me.
right
Do
now.
it.
I don't care what you're doing with your friends. Read my book.
right now.
I'll go get him his Babank. It's okay. He's got it on the shelf.
He'll be out soon.
It's on the
Yeah.
second shelf over there. He can reach it. Unlike you, Nick, it's up there, way up there, where John Frame is standing over above him, looking
no.
down upon him.
Oh no, we got to fix that.
We've got to keep
gotta
Nick
fix
away
that.
from John.
I got Grudem next to Barwin.
Oh dude,
okay?
one of them is going to
This Horton
collapse.
is in between, standing in the gap.
It's gonna be it's gonna be like one day you walk into the office and the one's on its side, you know?
leading.
Hands and head cut off.
Exactly. But
You're gonna
yeah,
find
no,
like the top quarter of it on your pillow when you wake up. I think that's
for sure. The Renihans, you know, I think what you know, they're obviously, and you know, you could say that some of the other guys involved as well. But it's just what happens is the groundswell usually is a lot less nuanced, and so that's where the problem does come in, and that's usually where you see the plumb line of the theology. Like, you know, ultimately, Gill, you mentioned earlier, is a good example in that regard. I think in that, you know, you read Gill himself, he's like totally balanced and awesome and nuanced and all that sort of stuff, and then you read, you know, what came from some of those finer angles, and it ended up in not such a happy place. So I think that's a real thing. You have to worry about that, and it's always just tough being so darn perfect and balanced in your theology and being right in the middle of all the debates. And you know, it does have its own kind of burdens, I'll say. You know. Good. All right. So hey, it's getting on an hour, but I know you had 17 questions, of which you've asked one, Andre.
I haven't asked any of them, Mike. What are you talking
Okay.
about? I've just tried to, you know, piggyback on.
Well,
let me come back
out.
to something. Well, listen. Let me come back to something that Jordan raised earlier, which was about the point about Catholicity, and about how Baptists should embrace pedobaptism as a kind of, I can't remember what the exact phrase was that you used. Irregular baptism rather than a false baptism. Now, this is something that I think is very, very important, and has been a point that I've raised in the past as to, in defense of why I am open table and open membership as a Baptist. But I just thought I want to throw that out there and see.
Oh, I mean, you know, that's a firestorm for most Baptists because they don't like that. I mean, I think, you know, I'm going against probably the majority view, I would think, when you say that. But I just don't see any other way around it. I know not everybody feels the same pressure. So at least in America, there's been a lot of Baptists who I think have grown up in more landmarkist sort of tendencies or separatist sort of tendencies where it's much more just natural to say, well, I don't really care. I'm going to do my own thing and be independent. But I feel the acute pressure to say, well, I want to make sure that I can affirm all the Christians that exist. I mean, I don't want to shut off people and say, yeah, I think you're a Christian, but you can't actually have the table, which is the mark of being a Christian. I think that's incredibly inconsistent. And now, however, I mean, I understand that the pressures that come into it, because you want to say, well, if you really do believe Credobaptism, doesn't that mean that their baptism is invalid? And I tried to argue in a way of saying, well, it's not invalid, it's irregular. So there are problems with it, but however, you can still accept it as a ultimately a valid, because it has the core essential elements, being baptized in the triune name with water. Those sort of things are the core elements. However, the timing, as long as you have faith, is what having faith is the important core factor of it that makes it effective in some way. Now, obviously, I think a lot of Baptists are going to say, no, I disagree, but I feel the pressure of wanting Catholicity more than the alternative.
Yeah.
Before Nick gets into,
yeah.
I just want to say
here comes the
that I
grumpy guy.
think word for word with that. I absolutely agree and feel the same. And it's been a big part of, but it's so unusual to find. You don't often find Reformed Baptists who have open membership.
Yeah.
For that reason. So
Yeah.
I mean, just to say, we have open table closed membership. We call it our happy inconsistency.
Yeah.
So we believe that it's important to, affirm that all true believers should have fellowship with his church. But I guess just coming to the Catholic question, can Baptists confess with a full subscription that we believe in one holy Catholic Church? I don't think we can. I don't even think Presbyterians can. Because the Reformation introduced the categories of visible versus invisible, to go and stand in the original shoes of authorial intent as it was originally meant, where the visible and invisible church were conflated. We don't say the word Catholic with the same meaning. And as soon as you begin to then come to the Reformation and you bring the definitions of visible and invisible, you've got Fesco's definition of the visible church, which is a mixed multitude, but it's on the basis of a family connection. Whereas we also have a visible church, which is a mixed multitude, but we don't define the visible church on the basis of a family attachment. We define it on the basis of a credible confession. And so the keys of the kingdom are given to regulate the visible identity of the local church. And so for me, I'm quite happy to say that Pedobaptism is not a true baptism, because if the keys of the kingdom are given,
Nick, I missed a step in the argument there. Why does that mean we can't confess one holy Catholic and apostolic church?
What I'm saying is we don't mean it in the same way. Just as Calvin was able to confess that Jesus descended into Hades, but he meant something different. There's a nuance which, because we've grown theologically, because we have more categories to approach that topic with. When we say Catholic Church, we don't mean the exact same thing that the original authors did. So full subscription, just as we have a problem with full subscription when it comes to the Westminster Standards, likewise when it comes to the universal creeds, we have a similar problem. So meaning the word Catholic in the same way. And I'm with Brandon here. I don't feel the pressure, because I don't feel that I'm trying to align myself with that original authorial intent. I want to recognize the universal church. I want to recognize the work of Christ and be charitable in terms of including people who are genuine believers. But the way in which they conflated the visible with the invisible, the organism with the organization, we've learned since then. And so, how do we define the visible church? We define it differently. And so I can't say the word Catholic in the same way. So I don't feel the same pressure as maybe Andre, you're feeling.
I think that's interesting. I think a couple of things. First, the way I structure the covenants, I do think it continues to be covenant membership is based on family descendants. It's just my family head is Jesus Christ, and it's based on faith, not on physical generation. So I would still want to continue to use these family.
I saw that
sort
nuance
of
in your article there. Yeah.
Which I think I like it. It's attractive to me.
Are you the only one who holds that? I hadn't heard.
I haven't seen anybody else really press in like that, but I think it makes sense of everything, and you stay in this continuity of this family sort of unit. God,
and there is that passage in Hebrews as well, that Hebrews 2:13. We should, I'm just gonna drop that in there, which I think you could bolster your argument with that.
That's
but anyway,
true. I need to write it down and add it. The other point I want to add in was your quibble with we're not really affirming one holy Catholic Church, because that's not what the original authors intended. I mean, I would just want to say, well, who cares? I mean, there's all sorts of crazy stuff that the original authors intended in some of these creeds things. And I know that's going to get me in hot water or whatever. But I think if you it's really cool and hype to go affirm and say, yeah, I'm Nicene right now, which I am. And I'm very vigorously want to defend that. However, if you want to take the authorial intent to its logical end, you're going to end up having to take on all sorts of crazy baggage. If you go actually read the guys who are penning Nicaea, you just loaded yourself up with a bunch of stuff you don't agree with. Yeah. And I don't think you have to do that. I think you can unhitch it to some degree from the authorial intent, not completely. Yeah. But I don't.
It's
I think
this-
I'm fine taking Catholic in a different
Yeah.
way.
And
than they
I
would use it.
confess the Catholic Church, but I don't mean it in the same way, and so I don't feel I don't feel the compulsion to try and co-confess it in the same sense with
Yeah.
my Presbyterian brethren, because being a Baptist, we do have a Baptist definition of the local church,
Sure.
the autonomy of the local church, the way in which we define the local church through baptism, and so
Even
on.
when I come to a text in Scripture, what is it, Ephesians 4, where there's one faith, one baptism.
Yeah.
I don't know how I can confess one baptism if I want to invalidate 75% of people's baptisms.
Yeah. Well, just before we just on the
I could pull a John Murray on you and say it's spiritual baptism.
yeah, or John Bunyan. You mean?
Yeah, that's fair. You're right.
Yeah.
You know, you could, and I think that's a fair way to handle that.
Yeah. So on the confessional language thing, I love what Kelvin does. You mentioned, with the descendant into Hades thing. I think, he's just saying that basically this is the genius of symbols of the faith. They don't require you to affirm authorial intent. They're not the text of Scripture necessarily. Rather, the language is broad enough and wide enough to account for their own internal error, so to speak, so as to allow for an ongoing proclamation of the truth. So this is what allows us just to basically be able to affirm this together.
That's good. What source is that? Where is that? I read all of those institutes. I don't remember him talking about
I'm sure that was in Institutes. Nick and I read it together a while back. We were going through it was Institutes where he deals. If you just search up
Google this.
Yeah, search up his he'd be dealing with the Apostles' Creed. So that's where it was. So, wherever that is in the Institutes, I can't remember offhand, but you'll find it there. So and then
I think Kelvin was wrong on that particular one.
Sure, that's fine, but I think the principle he's trying to work with here is useful for us.
So you agree with Sam Renihan on that point?
I think he's saying he went down to the dead. That's what I'm saying.
Now, we've had a lot of nuance that's required there. I mean, I've done a good amount of work in this, and I think there's some problems, anthropological issues with Matt Emerson's big and popular here in the States, who's repopularized the traditional way to form this. And this is completely off topic, but I think it's just fun. So you can tell me if you want me to stop.
Carry on.
He's made some arguments that you have to be a dualist about a person if you want to affirm a literal interpretation of the descent. And I just don't think that's true. I think it actually can cause some more issues than fewer issues. So just for fun, if you're interested in those sort of things, I hope it's interesting.
I definitely, I mean, look, I obviously never want to disagree with Calvin, but I looked into it and I was just like, I like the other way. I think it makes sense. Fits in nicely. I don't see a problem with it, and I think it was what was originally intended, and so I've just gone down that line. So
I forgot that about you. I nearly had.
Yeah, the other thing about
the
me that I
streak
think
coming out there.
I know. So talk about someone wrestling with these baptism. There's someone else wrestling with these baptism.
Existential crisis.
Like going on for a long time.
The other thing, I've been backstroking the Tiber for a long time. But the other thing, the other thing that you raised in your article. Well, there were so just the three R's, right? Okay, because this is fairly foundational. Because you're saying like, how do you identify the essence of what it means to be reformed? And you got these three R's, and so I just had two quick questions about that. The one was, so the first R is to do with the one substance, two administrations thing. That's good, no questions there. The second one was the sacraments as a means of grace. Good, no questions there. The third one was where some of the questions came in. So you visible, invisible, we've been talking about, fine. You mentioned the regulative principle as kind of being important in that as well. Now, obviously, being over here in the UK, the Reformed Church is Anglican and rejects the regulative principle. So like, I don't know how that factors in. I also am aware that the regulative principle is variously understood amongst Baptists here as well. And so I guess my concern is I'm not sure how useful that is in terms of distinguishing Reform from non-Reform, because on account of the fact that A, you dismiss the whole English Reformed Church in one fell swoop, and B, it is so variously understood that I don't know if it's that precise a definition that will enable us to move forward. So that was, I'll throw that one at you. Actually, I'll put them both at you, and then you can answer them both how you want. So
this is what I was talking about when
too much
he's
coffee.
in,
I've had too much coffee.
he's in prime time. You know, he's sort of like doing. You're lucky you didn't tell a joke or something. That's
I'm
all I'm
just warming
saying.
up right now too, so we're in a good spot.
That's true. Well, I'm getting sleepy, guys. So make this quick.
No. So listen, the other thing was about was to do with R1 and to do with the covenant administration, and you used the example of the Sabbath to illustrate how, like, you can't reject the Sabbath because that would reject the whole one covenant, two administrations reform thing. Now, I happen to think that maybe the Sabbath is not a good example there, because you mentioned the threefold use of the law, right? Now look at these guys. They're about to give me a hard time. Listen, I'm just saying the Sabbath.
Bro, just spit the question out. Make it snappy. We're dying over here.
You're distracting.
Like, what do you
me.
even want to ask? We don't even know what you want to ask.
Right.
Come on, do it.
So you mentioned the threefold division of the law, moral and ceremonial and all that. And so, but the assumption is that the Sabbath observance is part of the moral law, because, again, built on another assumption that the Ten Commandments is the moral law, pure and simple. And I just want to go back to that inquiry. So the whole assumption that the Ten Commandments are the moral law purely and simply, I'm happy that it contains the moral law, but it's still dressed up in Mosaic covenant garb that needs to be interpreted through the gospel, which means that the Sabbath commandment, I think, doesn't pass that test, in my opinion, because of what the New Testament says about it. The way the New Testament talks about the Sabbath as being gospel rather than being law. But then also therefore, could, someone like me would just look at the Sabbath commandment and put it as in a ceremonial category rather than a moral category. And so, again, I'm not the only one who thinks this, but I wonder, again, if the Sabbath is really as essential to the one covenant, two administrations things as humanity.
I mean, both of those questions are good. And if I want to be a purist, then I could say, well, who cares that I just excluded the Anglican Church, the English Church? I don't think I want to do that. So I think you've got to expand a little bit, like inconsistencies or problems there. However, to your Sabbath point, I mean, I think you make a fair point. If I want to make a stronger argument, I should use a doctrinal point that everyone universally says absolutely, because there are people who want to play fast and loose with the Sabbath like you, and that's fine.
I mean, but my question is, do you see the Sabbath as being essential to them?
I mean, I think you have to take at least some of it as moral. I can understand, and I think there's definitely room to say, well, the way the Sabbath command functions in the New Covenant shifts and changes. I'm cool with that. Like, clearly it's not the sixth day. Now it's the seventh day. So, like, stuff changes. But I think that just the traditional way of understanding it as, look, it's right there in creation. You see God resting on the seventh day. You see this pattern and exemplar of 1 and 7 days is dedicated to rest and worship as the principle there. I mean, I think you would agree that there's supposed to be 1 and 7 days that is dedicated to worship. So if we strip it all down to this really small seed, I would think everyone was going to want to say, yeah, absolutely. It's just when we start to dress it up and say, well, to make particular, I guess, commandments and rules from that is where the disagreements end up coming, at least as the way, from my vantage point, is how I see it. I think everybody wants to affirm a core small morality of this. It's just the conclusions that come from it that become an issue.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the whole the moral and positive aspects of the actual Sabbath commandment are quite interesting as well, in that it has positive dimensions to it, so as you were saying. So it is a complicated one, but I do think that's like sort of bridges into a whole new thing on the Sabbath, and it is a big topic, as we've explored before. You'll remember, Andrea? Yeah.
I know. I felt that we had decisively it settled the question. That's what I
Yeah.
felt.
Well, sometimes feelings deceive people.
No, but
And-
my point, it comes back to the point about using the threefold division of the law to determine what is moral and what isn't.
Yeah.
And I think the threefold division of the law it only works as a description of what there is. It doesn't work as a discernment tool, as a way of deciding what should be moral and what isn't. For that, we have to look to other hermeneutical questions. And I just don't, So I think in that sense, I just wanted to hear a bit more about why you thought the Sabbath was so important, because it could easily for me go, I could see how some people read it as moral, some people as ceremonial.
And I think that's precisely why I did it, was just to be controversial and say, okay, let's pick this point that I think majority of traditional Reformed doctrine want to say, yeah, that's moral, and let's play on this.
Yeah. It has an interesting angle, I think, and probably we'll see some more of this develop in terms of the way 1689 federalism has to work on the Sabbath piece. And anyways, again, I'm sort of trying to restrain, bearing in mind we're getting to the end of this. I don't want to get into a whole new thing here. But I'm also aware of, we sort of set a bit of a time here. I don't want to keep you guys all day. And I know you got work and get your stuff together and everything and get your kids organized and whatnot. So let's start wrapping this up. Let me just say, though, in case you might feel satisfied by this discussion if you're listening, and you might feel tempted to go, oh, well, there we go. I'm not going to go ahead and read Jordan's paper. That would be a mistake, because as good as this was, and it was pretty darn good, the paper's even better. So you need to go and read it. You need to get it online and check it out. And yeah, just be challenged by it. Don't feel alone if you're pushed right over the edge by it. That's fine. We all have our little sensitive spots. That's okay. But it'll just get you thinking, and you'll appreciate what we've said here a little bit more as well. Let me give these guys another plug. London Lyceum, is it .com?
Yeah, that's the website. So the LondonLyceum.com, and
Yeah,
you
so
can find
get
podcast, articles, stuff about us, all those sort of things there.
Awesome.
Yep,
So they'll get all the
pretty
info.
active on
there.
Twitter too. So
Yeah, nice. All right. What's that, Nick?
Good book reviews on there.
Yeah, totally.
I discovered these guys online through a book review that I didn't even know these guys existed until I found a book review, and then you told me
which
about
book was it?
The Jeffrey Johnson one.
Oh, of course, that one was real popular.
Natural Theology.
Yeah,
we've got one coming out in a couple weeks that'll get us canceled.
I found your book review. I found your website. I found 2H Sojourn on your website, and then I go speak to Mike, and he says, "Yeah, I'm going to be on their podcast." I'm like, cool.
There we go.
That's awesome.
Man. Totally. Yeah, so great. Really, just want to encourage you guys to keep going, doing what you're doing. I realize it's a lot of work, especially the way you guys do it too. It's all organized and awesome. And, you can tell it actually takes work to do that kind of thing. But, keep doing it, man. Keep doing it. We're all profiting from your labors there. And thank you to you both. Anything to go out on? Nick, you want to sing us a song? I don't know. It's late. You want to do something special? No?
That's good.
See, he's grumpy. See, this is what I was telling you guys
it's
about.
just like,
usually it'd be some excellent outro going on here. It would be amazing.
It's just like, I've had enough of you guys. Just go,
nothing, right? It's just old Nick Cleveley right there. Good. Andre, you good?
Yeah, I mean, I got more questions. But I'm good.
No, we're good. Thanks. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good. Yeah.